Hi there. This is just going to be a quick review of the Enlightenment that will help us understand what our romantic authors were rebelling against and reacting to when we get to Romanticism next week. So, what came before Romanticism? A period called the Enlightenment, and it actually has three names: the Enlightenment, the Augustan Age, or Neoclassicism. All of these basically refer to the same thing. The major authors during this time are Daniel Defoe, Swift, Alexander Pope, Fanny Burney, Samuel Richardson. And I know that if you took Brit Lit 1 with Bonnie, you might have read some excerpts from some of those authors. So that's good. If you haven't, don't worry about it. You don't need to have taken that class to take this one. And you may have read something, like you may have read Gulliver's Travels or A Modest Proposal by Swift. So you might have some familiarity with this, even though you may not know it. So this is the Enlightenment. And the Enlightenment has a lot of values and very kind of strong feelings about art that are pretty different from the ones that we have today. So it's worth really going over them. They really valued reason, especially reason over emotions. Rules, they wanted people to follow the rules, and they loved harmony. They also really felt that art should be didactic, that it should be entertaining, like it should please, but you should also learn a moral lesson from it. So it should please and instruct. And this is the place where they are so different from our own culture. They valued imitation over originality. It was far better to kind of copy somebody or imitate something old than it was to produce something new. They loved restraint, refinement, rationality. There was also a lot of attention paid to religious belief and piety. There is belief in like human beings as being good, belief in human goodness, and also a lot of this is connected to like the power of science to solve natural problems, the ability of humans to use their reason. There's also an emphasis on individuals controlling their own fate and engagement in the public sphere of debate. These were seen as public questions, big issues to be debated. The Enlightenment was a time when salons were very popular, people talking about the issues of the day, things like that. So these are Enlightenment values overall, I would say. Now, that's not to mean that everybody felt this way in the culture. There are some reactions to that Enlightenment value of reason over emotion. And one of those is called the cult of sensibility. And sensibility doesn't mean like being really having a lot of common sense or being really reasonable. Sensibility means having a lot of emotions. And this is kind of long quote here about what is the cult of sensibility. But this was kind of a minor cultural movement. It was a reaction to the Enlightenment. It was not the dominant mode at the time. But I do want you guys to know that not everybody during the Enlightenment was all about the use of reason per se. One of the earliest novels in English, Pamela, certainly one of the first bestsellers. There was Pamela perfume, Pamela fans, Pamela merchandise you could buy. It was insanely popular. Pamela is a novel by Samuel Richardson. And in the kind of introduction to his novel, he lays out these quotations that I have here that talks about like why he wrote this book and what he hopes people will get out of it. And you can see how this echoes some of those Enlightenment values that I mentioned: to divert and entertain, and at the same time instruct. Right? So he says this is going to be entertaining, but you're also going to learn some lessons from it. You're going to improve your mind. To paint vice in its proper colors, to set virtue in its own amiable light. This is going to be a work of morality. We're going to learn something moral from this. And the last bit is that I'm gonna do this in a really interesting way. Now, if you've actually read Pamela, you would know that it's a lot more about emotions than it is about reason. And a lot of what goes on in Pamela is kind of quite immoral and not moral. So there's a question as to how serious Richardson is being in his introduction. But it certainly shows that he feels like he has to try and frame his novel as fitting into these Enlightenment values. And we'll see, and especially when we get to like a lot of the works that we'll look at, we'll see like there's a tension between what the author claims for the work and what the work is actually doing. So, thinking about the historical events that inform this time, think about everything you know about the American Revolution as a kind of culmination of Enlightenment thought, reason, philosophy, people, thinking about the role of government and writing pamphlets and tracts, and Thomas Paine, Thomas Jefferson, and people like Benjamin Franklin, who, in addition to being a political leader and a thinker about democracy, invents scientific things like bifocals and other kinds of things like that. These kinds of people who were really interested in learning and in knowledge and in using their reason. Right, this has huge political impacts. We have the American Revolution, and then we get the French Revolution, which also kind of culminates out of this Enlightenment political philosophy and thinking. This is also an incredibly important era for philosophical and scientific publication. Um, Sir Isaac Newton, the discovery of calculus, all the kind of scientific discoveries and improvements and machines and things that will help start the Industrial Revolution. A lot of that gets started in the 18th century during the Enlightenment.